You're watching the legal breakdown. So, Glenn, one day after Trump's arraignment, he posted, "If you go after me, I'm coming after you" on the Truth Social. So, obviously, the big question here is, does this violate the terms of his release?
I think Donald Trump is running out of luck and he's running out of rope. Does it violate the terms of release? Let's look at the terms of release that were just set not 24 hours ago by Judge Tanya Chutkin. So I'm looking at a transcript of yesterday's proceeding, and here is, I think, what is at issue, because the judge very pointedly told Donald Trump, finally, sir, I want to remind you that it's a crime to try to influence a juror or to threaten or attempt to bribe a witness or any other person who might have information about your case, or to retaliate against anyone for providing information about your case to the prosecution or to otherwise obstruct the administration of justice. So based on that post, if they go after me, I'm coming after you, sounds to me like he is willing to, interested in, and intending to retaliate against people who are coming after him. Who's coming after him? Well, the prosecution. How about all of the witnesses who provided incriminating information? I have to believe, Brian, that Special Counsel Jack Smith and his prosecutors, as well as the assigned judge, Tanya Chutkin, saw that, and it made their heads explode, because there is a strong argument that not within 24 hours of being released on these conditions, he violated them. So, I think I'm very interested to see what the prosecution and what the judge do next.
Now, if Jack Smith were to challenge Trump's terms of release, what would the process for that look like?
So he would file a motion asking the judge to set what's called a show cause hearing. That means when the prosecutor believes a defendant may have violated conditions of release, we, the prosecutors, will ask the judge to force the defendant to show cause, why he didn't violate the conditions of release, and why he shouldn't be punished, sanctioned. And of course, the ultimate sanction is being stepped back. That is a term of art for being remanded to custody, being ordered detained pending trial.
Now, if the judge does ultimately agree that the conditions of Trump's release were violated, what would that look like? What would happen next?
So there's something of a sliding scale. I have a feeling the first thing Judge Chutkin or any judge would do, if she concludes that this either violates the terms of release or comes drastically close, she will probably ratchet up the terms of release. Specifically, what I think she'll do is spell out in great detail the do's and don'ts of release, because there's a little bit of wiggle room in this language, right? It's an open question whether this reckless, dangerous post directly violates one of the conditions that the magistrate judge just set. So she would probably ratchet it up. She would put him on more specific notice of precisely what he can and can't say, can and can't post, basically giving him enough rope to hang himself. And if there's one thing we know about Donald Trump, he doesn't really take direction or criticism or restrictions particularly well. So I don't think she would jump right to the end game of pretrial detention, though she could. I think she'll do it incrementally.
If Trump ultimately does continue to violate these terms, though, and he ultimately is remanded to custody, and the trial isn't for 6 months to a year, how long could he actually be held? I mean, is it possible he could be held in his cell for 6 months to a year?
Once somebody is ordered detained pending trial, they almost invariably remain detained pending trial, because there are no changes in circumstances, right? Once you have shown that you are unwilling or unable to abide by the conditions of release set by the court, if you violate them, you don't typically just go in for a day or a week or a month. You are detained pending trial. That's what the law provides. If there's clear and convincing evidence that you're a danger to the community, that you're a flight risk, or that you're unwilling or unable to abide by conditions of release, you're detained for the duration until that jury is selected, your case is tried, and a verdict is reached. I have had defendants in pretrial detention for literally 1, 2, sometimes 3 years. Now, let me hasten to add, Brian, we always tried to give people a speedy trial, often once they were detained pending trial. An example for a murder case, because it was clear that they were a danger to the community, it was often the defense that would insist on continuance after continuance after continuance to the detriment of their client. But yeah, they remain pending trial until the conclusion of their case.
Yeah, that would be pretty tricky for Trump's team, considering their biggest tactic here that they're happy to apply is to delay. And so if they're delaying this thing and he's held pending trial and they keep trying to push this thing out until some indeterminate point in the future, it's not exactly going to help their client. With that said, Glenn, what would his Secret Service detail do if he were remanded to custody?
So that's an open question. I've talked to some of my friends who used to work with the Bureau of Prisons and some of my friends in the United States Marshal Service. And what I have been told, even though I think this is informed speculation, because, we've never confined a president before. It's the first time for everything.
Yeah.
I think what would happen is the Secret Service would enter into a memorandum of understanding with both the Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshal Service. I say the U.S. Marshal Service because they ordinarily provide witness protection, including protection for witnesses who are detained, serving a sentence, but are cooperating, maybe testifying against a RICO crew. That is a U.S. Marshal Service responsibility. I am told that the Secret Service would strike a memorandum of understanding with both the Bureau of Prisons and the U.S. Marshal Service to basically hand off protecting the president if he was, confined in the Bureau of Prisons. But I think that's only a best guess on everybody's part. Hopefully someday soon, we're going to get a concrete answer to that question.
Yeah. Glenn, is there any reason that Jack Smith might opt to let this slide?
There is. There seems to be little appetite to put any restrictions on Donald Trump. Unfortunately, I do think he's the single most dangerous defendant pending criminal trial in our nation today. If the law applied equally, he would be detained pending trial. But I understand that, it will only increase the drumbeat and the cries of, political vendetta and election interference if you're confining a presidential candidate. So he may lay back and continue to give Donald Trump enough rope. But here is the other thing that may happen. When judges see a defendant violating conditions of release as set by the court, they don't always wait for the prosecutors to file that motion asking that a show cause hearing be set. I have had judges come right out of the blocks once there is some indication that there's been a violation of a condition of release, and we get the show cause order from the judge saying, hey, it has been reported to me, often by an organization called the Pretrial Services Agency, which monitors pretrial defendants, that there's been a violation. I want the defendant here. I want the prosecutors here. And I want the defendant to show cause why he shouldn't have his conditions of release revoked and why he shouldn't be detained pending trial. Tanya Chutkan don't play. I've said that before. She's a tough, no-nonsense, really accomplished judge. It wouldn't shock me if we saw her issue a show cause order on her own, not even waiting to hear from Jack Smith.
All right. And let's finish off with this. Trump has made posts before that seem to further bolster prosecutors' cases against him, but it doesn't ever seem to have much of an impact. Is there a reason why prosecutors might be reticent to leverage his own threats against him in court?
I don't think they will be reticent to use all of his dangerous, inflammatory posts as evidence at trial, maybe to show consciousness of guilt or retaliation against witnesses or threatening of jurors. If judges rule that it's relevant evidence for purposes of the trial, I can't explain. I will tell you, if I were handling this case, I think I long ago would have run out of patience, would have felt compelled to try to protect the community, the judges, the attorneys, the witnesses, the jurors, the grand jurors, and their family members, because, Donald Trump is forever calling out the family members of his perceived enemies. And I think I would have moved the court for pretrial detention. What's the worst that can happen? The court could say, no, we're not there yet. But doesn't that put Donald Trump on direct notice that perhaps the next post, the next misstep will result in his detention. That's the way I would handle it.
All right. Well, obviously, a lot to keep on top of right now as we watch now to see if anything actually does come out of this. And of course, to see if Donald Trump continues to violate the terms of his own release, which I think both of us would presume he's more likely to do than not. So for those watching, if you want to stay on top of legal news, make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.